2005. We're here with Mr. Roger Reeve and a group of students who begin with R. You are?
I'm Hannah Martin, and I'm from Loveland, Colorado.
Loveland. Hannah?
I'm Claire Thurman, and I'm from The Woodlands, Texas.
I'm Melissa Grossman, and I'm from Fort Collins.
Okay.
I'm Ute Thiele, I'm from Germany.
Very good.
I'm Jessica Cannon, and I'm from Steamboat Springs, Colorado.
Very good. Thank you all. Okay. Well, we're just going to get started. We'll just begin. You want to just tell us where you were born and...
I was born in 1926 in Elmwood, Nebraska, which is 16 miles east of Lincoln. And I lived there on a farm with my one brother and four sisters. And then in 1938, we moved to LaSalle, Colorado to run a fish farm. It's a trout farm. And we was in the trout business, which was quite interesting to me because we didn't have much water around us when we was growing up. But we raised trout, and we had them in pools, and we'd have about 10,000 fish in a pool, and we had about 16 pools, and they'd grow. We'd have them incised, and then it took them probably a year and a half to get up to marketable size. And then we went to Denver with them to the fish markets and to Cheyenne. And that worked all right till when we got old enough to go to the Army or the service. My brother went to the Navy and I went to the Army. And as soon as we got out of high school. And then I spent my couple of years, most of it was in Germany. And that was real, the time period was bad, but the beautiful country. I was down in Bavaria a lot of the time. And then I came back from Germany, and I married the girl I went through school with there in LaSalle, and Greeley to high school. And we was together 52 years, and she passed away 6 years ago. But we had a daughter and two sons. And in the meantime, I worked at the elevator and farmed. I raised cattle. I run a service station for several years in a garage. But I've done just about everything that way to try to make a living. But we're happy all the time, so that's kind of the gist of the overview of it anyway.
Okay. Questions then? Who's first?
Can you just tell us a little bit about your school experience?
My school experience? Well, of course, we got through the grade school all the time, and I used to like to sing, and so I did quite a bit of singing in church and in school and whatnot. And then I also wrestled on the team, went to state once, didn't win, but that's about the size of my school, really.
Did you have Pledge of Allegiance every day? Was that part of your school?
Oh, yes, and grade school especially. I don't remember in high school so much of that.
Right.
But in grade school we did every day. Yeah.
All right. Can you tell?
And you'll have to speak quite as loud as you can, so
Okay.
so you'll hear all the questions.
Okay. Can you tell us about your parents and your grandparents?
Sure. My father came from England. We just had our reunion. It was in LaSalle too, and that was we had 80-some people there, and they've come from all over the United States. But he was from England, and he came over with his parents, and then my mother, she was, my grandmother was Welsh on my mother's side, and a German father, and their name was Pfeiffer, and so that's I'm just kind of all mixed up
Yeah.
as far as which most people are in the United
Yeah.
States. Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell us some of your memories of the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl?
Yes, I sure could. We lived in Nebraska when that happened. And I remember the Dust Bowls real good, and we had no rain. And the dust would get from Oklahoma and Kansas, had just come in and just be thick in the sky that you couldn't hardly see the sun. It just fused the sun. And then we had grasshoppers on top of that, and cinch bugs, and there was a little red bug, and they didn't fly, but they crawled. And we had to go around our fields and dig a V trench out, and then we dug a post hole every so often, and we lined this trench with creosote. They wouldn't cross a creosote line. And then they'd follow this down and they'd fill them holes up that we dug with post holes. That's how bad they were. And then you talk about Nebraska and getting hot. One day it got to 107 and the dry wind blowing. We had a nice green cornfield, and by night that had turned completely white. It was the end of that corn crop. So that was kind of the things I kind of grew up with, yeah. And poor. Everybody's poor, but you know, kids, they don't know they're poor. We always had plenty to eat because we had our cows and our things to, we had our milk and butter and eggs and everything. So really, it was all fed good, you know. And everybody was really them days, if you lived on the country. But those that lived in town, of course, they had to get help. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So these winds that were driven with the sand and the dirt, I've seen pictures and accounts where they were 300 feet high and
Yeah.
you could see them coming, right?
Yeah, right. Oh, yes. And you plugged under the doors with wet rags, wet burlap or whatever you had to keep it from coming in, you know. Yeah, bad. And then the winds would blow our topsoil off and just pile it high on the fences, and if there's weeds in there and stuff, then you had to get that all dug out again after things got cleaned away again. Some of them never did get, they just started farming on the inside of them and went wherever there's a fence and stuff. That was a big ridge, you know.
So how discouraged did people get after a while?
Well, pretty discouraged, of course, yes. But there was nothing to do about it. There wasn't 15 cents in the county, you know, you didn't have any money. Yeah. And, well, we'd go to town, we'd take our eggs, and we'd do it all at the grocery store. The grocery store had, took in your eggs, and they took in your cream, and then they give you a script back for your groceries, so you could add so much credit. That's interesting, you know. We just can't fathom that kind of thing anymore, you know. But in towns, you've seen the pictures of the old bread lines and everything, and the soup kettles and stuff, and that's the way they had to get along.
Did you see town people or city people coming to the country to try to find something?
Oh, of course, we knew people in town that they would come out, yeah. But we actually, as I remember it as a kid, we, like I say, always had plenty to eat, you know, and we did our own butchering, and we put our pork up and everything. So we had always had plenty to eat.
Yeah.
People would come out and which was, my mother was a good cook. And that's another thing I learned. I always seen that done, cooking. And my wife got sick. She was sick for 6 years, and she couldn't cook anymore. And she was bedridden, so I took care of her. And she was a good cook. And so I learned how to cook from her. She told me what to do, and I make things. And I still cook today, and I cook for my sons. And if I make a cookie, I can do that. I've just learned, I watch these cooking shows, you know. Yeah, you can learn a lot from them. It's like you can watch them and see how you can peel a tomato. It's tomato season. I was watching my sister-in-law, and she couldn't get the skin to come loose. She was heating them all right, but she was overheating them and wasn't cooling the tomato off. You're supposed to put it in a cold water or something, and then just catch the skin will just peel right off of the thing. But she was overcooking a little and not cooling them down, and she's taking the meat we got rid of. She said, "I don't know why," and I wasn't going to say anything. But anyway, the cooking's fun. Gives me something to do too.
Okay, now just jump right in here. You don't have to hesitate. Just please.
Where were you on the day World War II broke out? And
Pardon?
Where were you on the day World War II broke out? And what are some of your memories about
I
that?
was sitting in college high school that next morning. I was my first year in high school, and when Pearl Harbor was bombed. And so that's where I was at. I'd been, well, I suppose I was 15 or so. Yeah, and that was a very scary time. We had scares that maybe they were going to attack our mainland, and we had this kind of thing we're worrying about. And you know what they did to the Japanese people? They moved them all off the coasts and moved them into here and every place else. And we had a lot of Japanese children then come and go to school with me in high school.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, oh yeah, for that moved off the coast. And we had a reunion up there at College High, and some of them was there from California. They'd moved back to California after they'd been moved out. Most of them had. Some of them hadn't. Most of them went back home afterwards.
So can you talk about the prisoner of war camp that was just?
No, that was for the soldiers.
Oh, soldiers.
But they moved these Japanese, most of them, and right into the countryside, and they lived in Kersey and LaSalle and every place.
So they just transplanted
That they just got them off the coast.
people off the west coast.
They did have, if someone was, they was worried about them, you know, well, they did have some retainment places for them, I think.
Yeah.
I think there was, I've seen that they did have. Yeah.
So families were brought here? And,
Yeah,
Okay.
whole families.
Whole families, and they settled sort of near you. I mean, they
Right, a lot of them was out of Big Bend and whatnot,
Yeah.
and settled on farms or rent a farm, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just most all of them that were here were brought in at that time.
So did you finish high school and then join the Army?
Yes.
Okay.
But I never got back to college. I got married, and I didn't know really what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And so I ended up then going to work at the grain elevator. And I worked at that for about 8 years, I guess. And then I went in selling some feed out in the country. I sold Mormons feed. And then that didn't work out too good. And so I opened a filling station. And then from there into a garage. And so, and then back to the grain again. And then after I got back to the elevators again, when I decided that I wanted to feed cattle and be a farmer. So man by the name of Mark Stewart there was running the elevator, and I was working for him. And I told him what I wanted to do, and so we went together and we bought a farm out east of LaSalle there, and I moved out there, but I still worked at the elevator, and then we bought another farm, and so we've done that. We had two of them. Well, then I took one of them after we parted ways after a few years. I took one, and he took the other one, and so I'm still out on the one where I'm at now, but I turned it back because I'd fed too many cattle and I broke feeding cattle. But I'd kept some mineral rights, which has helped me immensely in the later years.
Can you explain what an elevator is and what the purpose of it was?
A grain elevator is a place where all the farmers can bring their grains in and dump them, or they can get it ground or made into feedstuffs for their own cattle. And you know, we sold all kinds of calf feeds and this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Everything for the farm, really. You got insecticides and stuff for your grains and everything. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have another question. After Kennedy was shot, the world damaged. How do you think things have changed in the world since then?
How was that again?
After Kennedy was shot, how did it change the world?
How it changed the world? Well, maybe a little more fearful of everything. And that's always sad to have something like that happen. And it happens more now, you know. I don't understand all of this that I see over there now with the bombings and stuff, you know. So that was bad time though too. Yeah, very bad time.
So did the economy change at that time, or didn't that have an effect?
Our credit has just gotten looser and looser here all the time. It didn't used to be that everybody could afford a home or anything. You rented or you built one yourself or something. But now everybody's in a home, and a lot of them that maybe you're finding that our bankruptcies are higher now than they ever have been. And maybe some of these people shouldn't be getting themselves into that at this time of their lives, you know, because a lot of times just a month or two out of work and they lose their family home, you see, and then they've lost the money that they've put into it too. So, but the money has been a lot different, and consequently, you see things that didn't used to bring very much money, like back in my day, didn't bring much money, that are clear out of sight. Now it's really expensive. I don't know how why the taxes on some of them houses are more than I used to make payments and stuff, you know.
How do you think farming has changed in the last 100 years or so?
Well, in one way, it's the same. They're still not making any money. But other than that, we used to do everything by hand. And it took a lot of people to do things. And in that book there, shows them throwing grain into the separators, but it took people shocking this grain by hand. None of that's done that way anymore. It's all done big machineries and it goes in there, but that same big old machine, which didn't cost you hardly anything, just your team of horses and you, but you didn't get much done, and then the horses ate half of what you paid. But these big equipment, a lot of them bring $100,000 in excess, and you wonder how you're ever gonna get them paid for, I'm sure.
In your neighborhood, you said you lived in the country still?
Mhm.
Is there a lot more people living out there now? Or are there more farms or less farms? Or what kind of houses?
They have taken, we've got so many people now that they've taken our water away from us that we used for our wells. And the town, the cities have bought the other water, the irrigating water, and we're getting houses all around us out there, aren't we, Steve?
Mhm.
And it's gonna turn that way, yeah. So,
We've talked about this a number of times, but what is happening in the entire Front Range is the change that the economic value of the water, it means it is so much more pricey that a municipality will more or less demand the access to the water, and that's where the big water fight is now between municipalities and the farm use. And so the dollar drives it, and so there's been numerous political things that have gone on that have shaped this and stacked the deck, but in general, the farming as we've known it is over. Farming now is, and you can talk about the development of feedlots and why they were there. I mean, as he's talking about when he started, everybody had a small herd of cattle or maybe dairy cattle, but then the concept changed, and that became feedlots.
yeah.
And can you explain why we had feedlots and what difference that made to the economy?
Well, we all had our cattle or our dairy herd on the place, and Steve's grandfather had worked dairy herds all his life. And, but everybody did, that's where they made their living. And pretty soon, you got big dairies coming in, they buy these guys out. It just made it a little harder. For first, you had to have, got to the place where you had to have 500 cows to make a living milking. And that puts a lot of stress on you too. But then it got to be 2,000 head of cows now to make a living in the dairy business. And then I run first I had a cow herd. We run 150 head of cows. And we raised the calves, and we'd send them to the market once a year. And then it got to the place where we couldn't make that work. And then we got to feeding a few. And so, well, pretty soon you can't make that work. Then the big pack plants, we used to have a Stockyards Act that wouldn't let a packer feed cattle. And pretty soon they got done away with that, so your money got that gone. Well, then that opened it up to big feedlots owned by packing houses. And now, like Montfort's went in over there, and that lasted probably 25 years or so. And then he sold out. And then Swift is out of it now, but all these people, they started buying them. Instead of those guys out there where we didn't have our cattle anymore, so we started selling them our hay and our corn. And then now they rail that in, and so that's another thing that pushed these farmers in the corner. They ship that grain in by rail and stuff, and don't use, or you give it so cheap you can't make it work, see? So, it's a bad situation. They say what goes around comes around, so maybe it'll come back and change again some, but I think, but our farming's done out in that area because we don't have the water no more.
Okay.
They put the people's first as far as the water goes. That's what they say.
And a short aside on that, there is talk about gathering more water, because Colorado is still, water that goes out of Colorado goes to other states. And that's why you'll hear over the next years, these discussions about developing more reservoirs. When it was so dry 2 or 3 years ago, there was a big enthusiasm to say, let's capture more water so we can continue to use it. But things are all fads, and, you know, the things change quickly, and people forget quickly
Yeah.
what,
As soon as we get a lot of water, we forget about it for a while.
yeah, that's right.
Have you noticed, like in your lifetime, a change in like the weather patterns, like more extreme winters and stuff?
Very, very, very much so. We haven't had a cold winter like we used to come out of for years. And we used to have them all the time. And now we're losing our polar caps, and we got global warming. I don't know whether that is all natural. I'm sure a lot of it is. They say that there's a lot of eruptions underneath keeping the water warm, but it's melting those caps. And I heard one of them say here just the other day, instead of having New Orleans being in trouble, if this keeps on going, we're going to have all of our seasides are going to be in trouble, because this level will come up as that melts.
Do you know what your grandparents and parents did in England for a living? Were they farmers or?
My grandfather over there, they were millers.
Okay.
They had, in fact, I didn't go on the trip back there about 10 years ago. They had a reunion and went back to England, and they got a picture of the old mill, and it was water driven and was still being operated.
Wow. That's cool. So do you know why they decided to come to the States?
Well, really, I think England, things was poor over there too, you know, and that was hard times. That's back in the 1800s there. Yeah, it was just hard times all over, and Ireland had their famine too with their potatoes, and yeah, a lot of history. Yeah.
Did you get many chances when you were younger to travel?